Welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess, president of GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery, and we have managed more than $1 billion in recovery for thousands of policyholders, whether they're businesses or community associations. We want to be your source for insurance information that you can use. We are insurance coverage experts. Today's topic is an interesting one. Who's representing the insurance company in your claim, right? There's a lot of questions about how insurance companies are managing claims, how they're managing their book of business. We're hearing, obviously, issues of insolvency. But my big focus, obviously, in our practice at GlobalPro is in making sure that our policyholders, their interests are protected and they're getting the most from the product that they're buying, making sure that what they are doing at all times is in the best interest of themselves, as well as making sure that the insurance company is acting in their best interest. Now, in order for that to happen, there needs to be many different people involved in the process, whether it's independent adjusters, company adjusters, brokers, agents, other insurance company representatives. So I have a long list of different individuals that during the claims process you may engage in some way to assist with the claims process. Now, the interesting thing about this is that nearly everyone involved in the insurance claims process is not legally looking out for your best interest as a business owner or a community association member, whether you're a property manager or a board member. Now, I find it strange, but many very successful professionals that I engage with all the time, many of which who hire us after meeting us, after giving us the opportunity to explain our services and what we do. However, they initially, when we're in early discussions about the insurance process, whether it's placing insurance or recovering from loss, it's remarkable. Even the most sophisticated, most successful people that I meet on a daily basis are so jaded and completely misunderstand the actual process and have, quite frankly, no idea what they're doing in the process of buying insurance or in managing their actual claims. And a lot of them are basically operating based on some misconceptions or misinformation regarding who's there protecting their interests and thinking that, really at the top that my insurance agent or broker is doing what they can for me. Now, insurance agents and brokers obviously have a vested interest in your happiness, but also the happiness of an insurance company. So to say that they are there for you is certainly misleading. And the reality of it is, as I will show you later on, is that they're not actually licensed to do much of anything other than sell you a product. Now, I carry a 220 license in the state of Florida to sell insurance. Now, I obtained this license by submitting obviously my work history, my credentials, as well as taking a test. I went through this process more for the benefit of my clients and myself, and just understanding the process, understanding what they needed to know in order to get that license to be able to sell you insurance. And also, as we help our clients and policyholders place insurance, it gives me that knowledge, that information as to what it would take to get appointments, what it means to go to the market, how they put together the proposals, the information you rely on in order to make your decision as to what you're going to buy. Now, the list of people that may be involved in a claim is quite frankly, significantly longer than the individuals that will probably be involved in actually placing your insurance. Typically, in placing an insurance, there's just a few people involved. Literally probably maybe 2, maybe 3, depending on the complexity of the type of insurance you're purchasing. For instance, if you're a community association, you usually have a broker. Maybe they have someone in the inside within their actual agency that may be assisting in obtaining and collecting the information. And then most often, they're going direct through a direct appointment with an insurance company. There may be one other person on the side of the insurance company that's reviewing and submitting things. And maybe there's an underwriter or a few other people looking at that stuff. As we've learned, there's less going on in the underwriting side than meets the eye, and most often it's typically just 1, maybe 2 people, and again, one on your agency side and then one on the insurance company side that has looked at the stuff and simply checked off boxes in compliance because the underwriting standards have been basically fed to them, and they basically say, just go buy this and we can submit these things as needed. Now, if you have a complex insurance policy, let's say you're a marina, an airport, even maritime type insurance for a yacht. Many of the things that we've dealt with before, there may be a few more people. You need to get surveys, you need to get appraisals done. Even on the property side, and going back to my earlier example, a lot of times, and what we've seen, even for community associations, are using older appraisals. So at some point, there was an appraisal done, but typically through a renewal process, you're not going to even involve an appraiser at that point. I would say that's not the case on the maritime side, or for some of these more complex claims. You're typically required to get updated appraisals when doing these things. Your business changes as it operates, as your income fluctuates or changes, or maybe you vertically integrate and you add another type of service to it. They're going to want to know more about that stuff. So, but again, when it comes to the claims process, there's so many more people involved in trying to figure out what the insurance company owes you, how that product that they sold you is supposed to perform. Now, you might think that they're there to try to actually review the policy and look at the policy. What we frequently find is that the actual adjusters and all of the team of experts and other representatives of insurance companies don't even have a copy of your policy when you report the claim or early on in their actual investigation or adjustment of the loss. It's only usually when there's some sort of pushback or some issue do they actually start to review the policy or to look into the policy. Even if you received a letter from your insurance company, most often it's not because they reviewed your policy, it's because there's some fancy software they have has fed them some boilerplate template letter, typically your reservation of rights. They click on a bunch of boxes based on the type of claim and the type of policy you bought. Believe it or not, a lot of this is automated. It will actually feed them some reservation of rights template letter that goes out to you. It's not specific to the situation you're in, and most often for most policyholders that are not represented, they don't actually take the time to respond to it. And unfortunately, that's really where the problems start, super early on in the claims process. The earliest time that most of the problems start is actually in the initial reporting. As we have found and studies have proven, within that first 72 hours is usually when most of the mistakes are made by policyholders when actually making a claim. And most of that has to do with how they're reporting a claim. So that gets me back to the point I want to make here, is who's actually involved in the process and who, on behalf of the insurance company, is managing your claim, right? So let's start at the top. Your broker agent, as I mentioned, you have independent adjusters, you have company adjusters, and then there's other people. You have claims examiners, you have consultants like engineers, building consultants, you have desk adjusters, you have claims managers, and then you have lawyers. And then one last category of people is called public adjusters. Now, most people have never engaged a public adjuster, or if they think of a public adjuster, they probably don't think of them in a positive light. And I say them, I mean that licensing, the people that actually hold a public adjusting license. Because at the end of the day, it's a license that someone holds to provide a service. And that service, as dictated by law, by common law in many different states throughout the country and abroad in many different countries, they also accept the practice of public adjusting. What it states, and as I will show you, is that they are there representing your interests in the claims process. Every other person or title that I just mentioned, does not represent your interest in the adjustment of a claim. Now, they may try to assist you, they may try to provide you additional services. Even when they're doing that, they may be questionable as to what they're doing. And ironically, though, usually that questionableness is with the agent and broker. The agent and brokers that have these claims teams that claim that they have people on their team that can help you in the adjustment of the claim. And if you get into the actual statutes on agencies and the adjustment of claims, you'll realize that if they're not actually licensed and registered with the state as a public adjusting company, then they are certainly engaging the unlicensed practices of adjusting. Even so, if they engage in adjusting as an agent, what the law states in some convoluted way is that most often they are there for the insurance company. They actually are adjusting on behalf of the insurance company if they have the prior authorization to do so. So it never actually gives them the right to do that unless they're acting as a public adjuster as well as an insurance agent, meaning both companies are registered to provide the separate services and they hold the requisite licensing, continued education, et cetera, bonding, background checks, fingerprinting, all that goes into getting both those licenses. They have complied with all of the obligations under all of those various different statutes. Now, each state in the United States is a bit different, and the most stringent one that we see with regards to licensing requirements and restrictions as of today, I would definitely say that Florida spends the most time in dealing with that. Texas, I would say, is closely right behind there, and there's many different statutes and common law that address the issue of public adjusting. And I would say that Texas and Florida are quite similar. There's many different nuances to it. You have New York there, New Jersey, many others obviously have the same licensing requirements require a license as a public adjuster to represent the policyholder interest, but they are a little bit different. Even though, because I hold a license in Florida, I can get my license in New Jersey by submitting an application and not having to go through another test, et cetera, there's still separate and different statutes and common law requirements for a public adjuster in, let's say, for example, in New Jersey. However, getting back to who's representing your interest on behalf of the insurance company and the long list that I provided to you before I started talking about public adjusting. So we had the independent adjuster, we had the company adjuster, we had the broker, the agent, we had the claims examiner, we had the claims manager, we had lawyers. We also have this funny thing in between, what's called a TPA, or third-party administrator. And a third-party administrator is a company typically that is hired by an insurance company to manage and administer their claims on their behalf. So the TPA, third-party administrator, which quite frankly I was searching through several different states' websites and I couldn't find any reference. It doesn't mean it's not there, but I was doing a pretty exhaustive search. But I actually couldn't find any actual guidelines for what it requires to be a TPA and why they have the right to do what they're doing. What I could find is language and information about independent adjusting, because most TPAs, third-party administrators, hire independent adjusters to adjust claims. Interestingly enough, the TPA is most often given limited authority, where the independent adjuster is given no authority. And I mean authority as to paying the right, the obligation or the authority to authorize payment to you for your damages. Now, most of you will, at experience a claim, will only meet the independent adjuster. Some of you may speak to the third-party administrator representative, which most often is a claims examiner or claims manager. It goes under many different titles, which obviously is a confusing point in itself. And a lot of you don't realize is that more so today than ever before, the TPA is reporting not to the insurance company, but to lawyers that are reviewing, who actually have more authority and additional authority above and beyond the TPA. And then they will then report back to the actual insurance company representatives. Now, the lawyers and the TPA may work hand in hand and may copy each other in on the communications. But again, it's becoming a bit of a confusing nuance that's occurring today in today's market when dealing with these types of claims. So out in the field, you have your independent adjuster. Inside the office, you have your claims examiners, you have your claims managers. Now, the claims examiners and claims managers sometimes have the authority to direct the independent adjuster or to engage a consultant or an expert to further investigate a claim that you make as a policyholder, or the claims examiner, claims manager will simply assign an engineer or a consultant to your claim to do that on behalf of the insurance company directly. Now, that list of approved vendors usually comes from the insurance companies. Sometimes it's the TPAs because they rolled up a lot of these smaller mom and pop shops, and now they have these big companies that manage thousands of claims on a daily basis. And a lot of times they have their own pick-through list, and part of their contract with the insurance company is giving them the authorization to decide who's going to act as the expert. And the experts themselves, allegedly and most often, it is represented by the TPA or the claims examiner, the claims manager, or the independent adjuster to the policyholder that the expert, the consultant, is licensed and is competent and holds the expertise in order to assist them in the actual adjustment of your claim. What we have found is that there's this trend, and I would say it's not a new trend, it's just a growing trend, where you have an engineering firm that has added "and consulting" to their name of their company. And the reason why they most often do this is because they're no longer just an engineering firm made up of engineers. They're an engineering and consulting firm. What they are is a few engineers with a whole lot of people or staff that are consultants, that are not licensed, don't have expertise, and don't have any experience, the necessary experience to actually ascertain the causation or scope of damage that you are reporting to your insurance company. The cause of the loss is a very important thing, and if you don't have the competency, nor the licensing or the credentials to opine as to what caused it, or can't even determine the scope of it because you have no experience in doing it, and you're simply relying what you've been told or the directive or the boundaries in which you are allowed to practice in, that's certainly not giving a unbiased or a credible opinion to help with the process. And so as policyholders, we need to start asking questions about who is handling the claim for insurance companies. And that's what this is all about. So when you have an independent adjuster come out to the property, or a company adjuster, and we can talk a little bit of difference. Company adjuster is someone that's appointed directly from the insurance company that is working directly on behalf of the insurance company. There are few insurance companies out there that still engage in this practice, but there are still some. Most go to an independent adjuster. The independent adjuster is hired by a third-party administrator. The third-party administrator is given authority from the insurance company to act on their behalf up until certain limits, and then they have to go back to them for additional limits. Sometimes that TPA is deciding who is going to get hired, not only as an independent adjuster, but also as an expert or consultant. And then that expert or consultant is typically determining who's actually going to go out to your property. Is it the actual competent licensed individual that's going to investigate your claim? Or is it just simply someone from their staff that's going to collect information, bring it back to the office, write up a report, and then the engineer or the licensed contractor, whoever actually holds the competency, is going to do a peer review and then sign and stamp that report, which is then going to go to the insurance company. Now, they didn't write it or they were involved in a drafting of it, but they are being held out as the expert. And the insurance company is now going to rely, and the TPA as well, is going to rely on their statements in order to determine whether or not your claim gets paid and how much. All right. Now, again, all of those individuals involved in that process, not a single one of them represents your interest. Now, if you actually look at the Florida statute, and I brought it up because it's a little bit more descriptive, and I'll put it here on the screen, and you look at the amount of people, right? That's the statute under property insurance 626, which talks about all the different licensing and defines who does what and what does what, and the functions and how to get the licensing and what you can or can't do. And you look at all the different names. I mean, many of these you probably never even heard of. And then you get in this category like catastrophic and emergency adjuster. They actually had to create a special category that would give the insurance company authorization to, on an emergency basis, hire people that they know nothing about. Hire people that can later on submit information about their competency and their credentials in order to have done the job that they might have already completed on behalf of the insurance company. Now, the laws and restrictions on that I will admit, have become a little bit more stringent. But I can tell you, as early as Hurricane Irma in 2017, we had a number of multi-million-dollar losses where you had adjusters from other countries, allegedly adjusters from other countries that were represented as adjusters by insurance companies and the TPAs, come into the country and adjust claims on an emergency basis for an insurance company. When we started doing some investigation and looked at the registry for in the state of Florida for their registration as an emergency or catastrophic, and we submitted an inquiry to the DFS, we come to learn that not only were they not registered here in the state of Florida nor hold any public adjusting license in the entire country, we actually couldn't even, and when we submitted an inquiry to the country which they came, we found out that we could do that. We learned that their license actually had expired even coming from that country. So again, there's the reason why the catastrophic emergency adjuster licensing, if you will, exists is because the insurance companies typically don't have the resources, the necessary resources, in order to respond to a major catastrophe. The reason for that is because they are selling insurance policies and obviously have a certain amount of premium they need to collect in order to adhere to their financials. Now, unfortunately, in a major catastrophe, they're limited as to what they can or can't do or what resources they have. So they need to be able to tap into other resources to be able to respond to these things. And in certain states in the United States, the insurance companies are now restricted as to how many people they can assign to a claim during the claims process. Like in California, as I've mentioned in prior broadcasts, right? And in the state of Florida, there's no such restriction. And unfortunately, as we've seen after major catastrophes, you'll have 2 to 5, maybe more adjusters, TPA representatives, claims managers assigned to a file before you get your even first notice of any sort of coverage determination, which in all of that delay, in what it does cause is an extreme amount of delay in that process. Their excuse is that the claim needed to be reassigned and that the examiner, the new examiner or the new adjuster needed to review the file, and they always ask for a couple more days. And this just kind of goes on and on and on, and that's what we've seen happen. So the catastrophe or emergency adjusters fly in and then they blow out, right? They come in, they sit on the file for a couple weeks, nothing really happens. Why? Because they're taking on as many files as they possibly can, because they're typically working on a flat fee or some basis, or even an hourly. And so they can get as many of the files as they can to justify as many hourlies as they can, or if they're even worse, they're working on a flat fee, they'll collect as many of those files as they can. And then what do? They write a bare bone report, they submit it to the insurance company gets it, probably missing information, shocking. They assign a new adjuster, another independent adjuster to the file, and then they send that person out to the property again, weeks later. Start the process all over again. That person submits the report back to the examiner. Examiner sends a letter asking for more information. Next thing you know, it gets reassigned to another adjuster. That adjuster goes back out to the property, and et cetera, et cetera. You see where I'm going with this. And that's what we often see after major disasters, after major catastrophes. And I bring this up because right now in the tropics, there is a storm. And it's supposed to be named here soon, if it hasn't already during this broadcast. And it's something to be aware of. It's something to take note of. It's something to understand that a lot of times the people that are being sent out by the insurance company have no authority. And I say a lot of times because unless they're a company adjuster, if they're an independent, there's almost no chance that they have any authority whatsoever. They're only there to work on behalf of the insurance company to collect information. And their compensation typically isn't even tied to any sort of results. It's simply on a per file basis or an hourly, which again, their contract that they have is with a TPA or directly with an insurance company, not with you. And if that's who they're getting 100% of their work from, that's whose interest they're going to protect. In fact, if you actually look at the statutes for independent adjusters, and I'll read it right here, and I have Florida in front of me here, 626.855, independent adjuster. An independent adjuster means a person licensed as an all lines adjuster who is self-appointed or appointed and employed by an independent adjusting firm or other independent adjuster, and who undertakes on behalf of an insurer to ascertain and determine the amount of any claim, loss, or damage payable under an insurance contract, or undertakes to effect settlement of such claim, loss, or damage. Now, what's interesting about the statute is that we are always told that they have no authority. But the law says is that they're there to ascertain and determine the amount of any claim, loss, or damage payable under the insurance contract. But I challenge you, next time an independent adjuster comes out to your property, ask them one simple question. Do you have a copy of my insurance policy? The answer is almost certainly going to be no. So if they're there to ascertain and determine the amount of any claim, loss, or damage payable under insurance contract, or undertake to effect settlement of such claim or loss or damage, and they've never seen, never have obtained a copy of your insurance policy, how do they know what you're owed? I mean, they are being tasked with doing such, but they have no authority. And the TPA that they're working for, third-party administrator, has some but very limited authority most often. Not always. Sometimes they have none as well. They still need to go to the market, particularly when you have these multi-layered policies with many different insurance companies on them. As we saw a lot after Hurricane Irma, the 2017, I would say even 2019 storm seasons, more and more every day that we're headed in that direction. There's dozens of insurance companies involved. Even the TPA has no authority. They have to go to a panel of decision makers within the insurance companies, and they will then tell them what they're going to do with the claim. However, their independent adjuster that went to the fields is there on behalf of the insurer, the insurance company, to ascertain and determine the amount of any claim, loss, or damage payable under the insurance contract. How's that possible? All right, company adjusters. We don't see a lot of these, but I'll just make a note of it. It pretty much says the exact same thing. Who undertakes on behalf of such insurer or other insurers under common control or ownership to determine, ascertain, and determine the amount of any claim, loss, or damage payable under insurance contract. Again, though, when I contact these claims examiners, even working for insurance companies directly, we mostly see this in the boiler machinery. They typically still have company adjusters. Ask those claims examiners, do you have a copy of my insurance policy in front of you? Because I want to know what I'm owed here. I want to know what I'm covered for. And be determined to get the answer that you're looking for. Don't listen to all the other smoke and mirrors and all the other garbage that they're going to say to you. Just focus on that. Do you have it in front of you? Because without it in front of you, they have no way of knowing. And I don't care what their computer screen says and some software system that they're using. I care what the policy itself says. Frequently, the letters that you receive, the template letters that you receive, will have information in there that's totally irrelevant to the claim that you made. Completely irrelevant. Why? Because it is a computer system most often telling these insurance companies what to send to you based on information they input. Now, and usually it's just try to cover all their bases, even though it may not be relevant to what the claim that you actually made. So question that. Why is that in there? Why are you doing that? Why are you giving me that stuff, right? And here's an interesting statute, 626.862. All right, it's for agents. Adjustment by a licensed and appointed insurance agent may, without being licensed as an adjuster, adjust losses for the insurer, represented by him or her as an agent, if so authorized by the insurer. I've brought this up before because I hear about how there's insurance agencies out there that say, oh, I have public adjusters on staff, or we have a claims team. I read it. It's in plain English for me. I don't know how they do it. It says the license and appointment of an agent may be suspended or revoked for violation or misconduct prohibited by, and it goes on to cite another statute. And that talks more about this issue, is the punishment for doing this. Who am I, right? Again, it's a practice by many. I question how or why it goes on, and how or why the Department of Insurance in many different states. And again, I found semblance of this law and the statute in other states, not only just Florida. I know I'm reading full Florida statute here. But it is worth noting, right? If you go to Florida Statute 626.863, claims referral to independent adjusters, all right? This section, okay, does not apply to catastrophe or emergency adjusters as provided, okay? And what this discuss is, and I'll read it. An insurer may not knowingly refer any claim or loss or adjustment in this state or to any person purporting to be acting as an independent adjuster unless the person is currently licensed as an all lines adjuster or appointed as an independent adjuster under this code. So only independent adjusters can adjust claims. We frequently see, though, consultants get involved in determining whether or not a claim should be paid or how much should be paid. And I question that constantly. So if you get a report from a consultant on behalf of an insurance company and any way in there it's making any sort of determination as to what should be paid, I would argue that they are acting as an independent adjuster, because it says, remember, who undertakes on behalf of the insured to ascertain and determine the amount of any claim, loss, or damage payable under the insurance contract. And we frequently see contractors and consultants put together reports, and in them suggest to the insurance company what they should pay or hold back for some payment later. Again, doesn't make sense to me. Moving on. An individual, a firm, a partnership, a corporation, association, or any other may not act in its own name or under a trade name directly or indirectly as an adjusting firm unless it complies with Florida Statute 626.8696 with respect to possessing an adjusting firm license for each place of business at which it engages in activity that may be performed only by a licensed insurance adjuster. Okay? And I read that statute because I go back to this statute on agents. Adjustment by a licensed and appointed insurance agent may, without being licensed as an adjuster, adjust losses for the insurer represented by him or her as an agent, if so authorized by the insurer. Okay? So a little bit confusing as to why or how insurance agencies are adjusting claims or involved in the adjustment of claims at all. And why a lot of policyholders believe or think or feel or want to believe that their insurance agent or brokers are there to protect their interests in the adjustment of a claim. And again, that's not to say that they're not there and trying to actually facilitate the process, because I can tell you more often today, a lot of insurance agencies have expressed frustration with the insurance companies, and they're getting the black eyes from their clients because they sold the product. And they want to do everything they can to help. Of course they do. Of course they do. But it's those that are actually marketing adjusting services as part of their portfolio of services as an insurance agency or brokerage firm. Again, to me, how? Why? Don't be so jaded as to think that they're doing that in your best interest. If they're willing to go that far, then I would start questioning or asking them about potential kickbacks that they get from insurance company based on loss runs, based on performance, right? Based on the performance, not the performance associated with what gets paid to you directly, but how much gets paid collectively to all of their clients and what that means for the profitability of an insurance company in their book of business, okay? The performance they're looking for is profitability. They're not looking that all your clients are happy with you and they all got paid. They're looking to see how profitable they were in all of that business they sold. And again, their biggest loss or their loss is the claims and the management of the claims themselves. So it's no surprise that insurance agencies are jumping into this adjusting world, trying to influence the way in which claims are getting paid. And I believe if you go to some of those executives, it's maybe tied to the way in which they're being compensated in addition to their commissions. And a lot of these contracts with these agencies and these appointments are available on the websites through disclosures made by insurance companies and their shareholders, where they're actually, based on profitability of book of business, will actually kick back money to an insurance agency. All right. Now, it kind of, again, it begs the question, how and why? Are you as policyholders believing that your insurance agency or your brokerage firm are there in your interest adjusting claim for you? Again, if I was an insurance agent or broker, of course I would want to make sure, I would want to stay as much as I can involved in the knowledge of what is actually going on in the claims process. But I certainly wouldn't market and advertise our adjusting services and that we have adjusters on staff and that we have this robust ability to actually help you manage your claims. That's not what it would be. Again, there's limitations to this stuff, and I think we need to be more reasonable with it. So that was a quick run-through, a rundown. I know it was long. I know I included a lot of information here, and I want to make sure that you're fully aware of some of the things that are going on in our industry. That's what this is all about every single week. So if you haven't already, like us, follow us on all our social media, and tune in every single week right here on the Recovery Report Live, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We have industry experts on all the time that are providing information. We talk about important issues like this. We break them down into detail sometimes. Sometimes we're a little bit more macro view on it. I wanted to get micro. I want to get into the weeds here today with you, break down some of these important issues, who these people are, show you what those statutes look like, how to read them, how to break them down, how to understand them, how to read them together, how to make the best and most informed decision as a policyholder. That's what Recovery Report Live is all about. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week right here, same place, same time on the Recovery Report Live.